I was born in the to my Euless and Elsie Booe in Haskell, Texas. Haskell, Texas, if anybody don't know, is in between Abilene and Wichita Falls. And I grew up in that community. I was born there. And shortly after I was born, unfortunately, my dad got drafted in the military in World War II. And during that period of time, I didn't know who my dad was, quite frankly, for about 3 years because he was going to the Army. And my mother and I stayed with my mother's parents for those period of times. Plus, I also had parents in the big city of Mundy, Texas. My grandfather and grandmother on my dad's side lived there. My grandfather was the constable in that city forever, although I'm the only child. But I had tons of uncles and tons on both sides of the family and tons of cousins. So I spent a lot of time when growing up with my cousins throughout that area, and had what I call a Tom Sawyer time. Sometimes I had a great time. I didn't know this, quite frankly, until my dad passed away. He never talked about the war. I do know this before I answer that question. He was missing in action for 2 to 3 weeks. And he said he was in France when that took place. I don't know how he got disconnected from his group, but he did. But anyway, he said he told me that he stayed all night with a French couple for probably 2 weeks. The French lady would not let him in the house. But he said he could smell bread every night be cooking. He said he slept in the barn. After my dad passed away, they had sent him a little card. It said, "Thanking you and the American troops for protecting our area during that time." And in my high school years, I went from grade schools. I went from 6th grade all the way through high school in Gainesville, graduated in Gainesville. Played sports up till my high school year. Well, when I was in between I guess it's my 8th grade and 9th grade in junior high school, my football coach, he also we went to my church, wanted to know if I wanted to work in the summer. I said, yeah, I could use a summer job, and I like money. So he said, I got a job for you if you want it. I said, what is it? He said, well, I have a ice cream route. It's not the typical ice cream truck you see today. It was a Cushman Eagle motor scooter. You had hot ice was what kept everything cold. So I bought me a straw hat, went to work on one Monday morning and rode that thing all summer. In my 11th grade year, I was in the high school in Gainesville, and they had a program called Distributive Education in Gainesville, and that allowed you to work a couple of hours every afternoon. If the school permits it, which they did, you got credit for it, like a course. I interviewed this gentleman who owned a men's store. Actually, it was a men's store. It wasn't like kids or men. It was just strictly men's. So I went to work for him, and what he really wanted to hire me for is he wanted to bring in more youth trade to that store. So I can remember one time, for a story I can tell you, that's in the old day when the hush puppies came out, and also corduroy suits and corduroy pants. So I went to school dressed up with my new corduroy suit and my new hush puppies, and also a button-down collar was something different, and that was new. And so I went to school that day, and man, I was a hit at that school. I was walking on air. They thought I was something. How did this guy get this stuff? And started calling me, how did you get these fancy clothes? I said, I told them I worked for it, which I guess I did. And I could sell shoes as good as anybody. I also could, as far as men's suits those days, you got to cut them down, measure them, that sort of thing. I could do all that too. I could do it all. So he'd give me a job once a month to go down the streets of Gainesville, paying his bills. And of course, who I was paying bills to were all these people who were owners of all these stores and all these businesses. So I had a great time, and I knew a ton of people for the couple of years, the years I worked there. So I remember going to this gas station, and the manager, the person who owned it, his name was Shorty. A little guy with snaggle teeth, but he was a good man. And I asked him one day, I said, Shorty, can I charge my gas to you? He said, well, I wouldn't normally charge it to somebody your age, but I know you, and I know where to find you. He said, I'll do it. So I did that. I did it several times with my girlfriends in the car to show them, hey, look what I got. I go, you sign and go. I'd tell Shorty, fill it up. He'd fill it up for me. And of course, sometimes he'd harass me a little bit, like when I went to pay the bill. He says, kind of showboating there for me, huh? Hey, put me on the spot. I went to North Texas with three other friends of mine. I was a business major, and I decided already after having working through a distribution education program and working for this gentleman in Gainesville that business was my choice. And I did get married. Still married the same lady, matter of fact, 58 years later. So I went to work for Texas Instruments in Richardson. Lived in Denton at the time. Went down there and worked there for 5 years at TI. And I had a blast. And I loved TI. I really did. TI was a good company to work for. We moved to Plano at that time. And I was looking at a Dallas Morning newspaper one day, and I saw an ad for a company called Xerox. I never heard of Xerox. I worked there for Xerox for 24 years. I retired from Xerox. I went there from the 1990s to the 2000 and whatever it was. I'd never really traveled that much, so I got to travel for about 2 years. And from Tennessee all the way to Florida, they had 10 states. And we put in branch offices and sales offices. This is kind of how I got to Hurst, Texas. At that time, I had a cousin who lived in Hurst. And he'd gone to college and he had kids, and we had kids. And he called me up one day and said, why don't you come to Hurst and have lunch with us and with our kids and my wife and your two sons. And I was complaining to him a little bit, and I complained. I said, hey, boy, I got this commute. I'm getting tired of this commute. And 2 years is tough. I said, you get home at 7, 8 o'clock at night. You work all day. He said, you know what you ought to do? You ought to move to Hurst. And I said, man, I just now got to Hurst. I didn't know how I even got here to your house. And he gave me a realtor's name. And I don't remember the name now. But he said, you should go talk to him. So I did, and we got along well. So I took a tour with him. He said, Bell Helicopter has got a lot of people at Bell, and he said they're taking up most of the property south. And he said, you might want to go look on the north side. And I said, well, okay. And this was in 1977. Bought a house in Hurst. It was in North Hurst. It was we were the third house on that particular street, and we bought that house, and I live there today, 45 years later, in that same house where the neighborhood is packed. When I first came to Hurst, it was basically all north of me with farmland. In fact, when I put in my grass in my yard in Hurst, I don't know how many horseshoes and stuff that I had dug up. And I talked to a gentleman later on and said, yeah, this was a big farm. And sometime he didn't say what kind, but obviously it had to be horses because those horses, there was horseshoes out there. The mall was already here. Of course, that was one thing that drew my wife, because there was no mall in Plano. You'd think it would be, but Plano was growing, but not like that. So that mall really intrigued her in 1972, trust me, because he went out there and said, oh, she was in heaven. My wife had a local newspaper called the Mid-Cities Daily, maybe just Mid-Cities, I can't remember the name. Anyway, and she said, she's reading an article and said, they have a soccer program for our kids. I said, well, that's great, because my kids had just played soccer in Plano before we had left. So I said that would be good. And this lady asked, asked my wife, well, do you know anybody does anybody in your family ever coach soccer? And my wife said, my husband had just coached, was a third team coach in Plano. So I signed up. That person just happened to be Joanne Shorey in Hurst, Texas. And that's where the first time I ever met Joanne. And I said, Joanne and I and her husband, Sadhu, from that point on, have been friends for a long, long time. So this was 1977. So I coached this little soccer team. These were under 8 boys, and I had 16 of them. And I coached with another guy who said he'd be assistant coach. He said, I know nothing about soccer. And he also lives in Hurst today. It's Jerry Busby. I met Jerry, and we coached this little team. And lo and behold, we wound up in that soccer year, our team wound up being the champion of under-8 soccer. There was Hearst was wanting to form their own soccer association in that period of time, and most of them were kind of like I am. They had not coached soccer much. Some of us have not. But make a long story short, as I walked out of that meeting that night, guess what? I was a chairperson of that committee that they'd picked, and I was a newbie in this city. I had some books that I did a little research, so I wrote up a piece of paper that told you how the organization structure would be, the soccer teams, ages and limits and so forth, and that kind of stuff. And then they told me, said, well, you need to go back to the Euless Bedford Soccer Association to get approval from them to put a soccer association in. At that time, we'd elected the board. I was the president. Paul Warchow was a vice president, and Paul Warchow and I sit and negotiated with the president of Euless and North Texas till about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we finally agreed upon something. We would not call it. They would allow us to keep it in Hearst, but it would not have to be a Hearst name. So I came up with the name of Youth United Soccer. Had another meeting, wound up getting the organization set up, and then I became the official president of the Hearst Soccer Association in 1978. And in the fall of 1978, we had our first season, and we had 900 players, and they had no place to play because, well, we did have places, but we didn't have soccer fields in Hearst. We had one in Mary Drive, one on Red Bud, and most of the soccer fields were played at the local elementary schools. So that's where we played for many years. I served on that park board from 1991 to 2006. And I tell you, the individual that I worked with at the Parks Board was Alan Heindel. He was in he was the Parks director. And during that 16 years that we worked together with Alan and his group, and there was other people, I wasn't the only one. We had, and Joanne Shorey, by the way, was also on that board as well. So we worked very diligently for the 16 years I was on there to push for soccer fields and stuff. And the first year that they had a bond election, and it didn't make it. I guess they redid it a year or so later. Needless to say, when that election come up, that it passed. The new fire station was started and built out there. They put five new soccer fields went out there. 4 baseball fields were going in. So what you see today is what we probably worked with back in the day I was on the Parks Board. At the same time, we had already had a program there about seniors at Christmas time, and the Park Board members would go out and secure gifts from various and sundry people who wanted to participate, and these gifts then would be drawn. Would go to the seniors who would come to this banquet. And that party has been going on for over, I don't know, way past 45 years. And we have had up to 900 people in that place that came in and enjoyed entertainment and that sort of thing. The other major thing we did too, I forgot to add to that, is we spent a lot of time and money on upgrading all the parks. And we have redone all those over the years to make sure they're safe for the kids to participate in. While I was on the Parks Board, we did the Chisholm Park once, and then we built a new pool at the Mary Drive, and put a new pool there. Then we upgraded them again to aquatic centers. So we had 2 aquatic centers, one in Mary Drive and the aquatic center at Chisholm, and so that was part of something that I was involved in. Yes, the rec center was remodeled during that period of time. Yes, and then we also approved in Southhurst Community Park, where we now put soccer fields, baseball fields, and we also have our July the 4th celebration here every year. It brings a big crowd. So we now have sports, sports both in Southhurst and Northhurst for baseball players, soccer players, and of course the city. And we also did Easter egg hunts. We have massive Easter egg hunts, and they're now at the new park we established here 6 or 7, 8, 10 years ago. We also had we had Santa Claus, and we had we got a cadre of things for our youth and for young people. Someone called me up at work one day and said, "Do you want to throw a baseball?" I said, "Can you throw a baseball?" I said, "Yeah, I can throw a baseball. What do you want me to do?" I said, "I played baseball a little bit." He said, "Well, I want you to throw out the opening season for I forget the number, the age of the youth, but small, young guys and older guys down at the community park." I said, "Well, that would be cool." So I got to go down there and had quite a crowd. I got out there, and a lot of parents are in the stands and stuff like that. I said, "Man, I haven't thrown a baseball in 25 years, probably." So I said, "This is going to look good." They're taking pictures of me, filming me out here. So I guess what they gave me? They gave me an 8-year-old. So I threw the ball, and luckily I threw it pretty good. And that dude, he probably could have. I probably threw it a little bit low. He scooped that ball up, caught it. I said, "He saved my life." And I spent 6 years, 7. I went from 2006 to 2013 on planning and zoning in Hearst, and that was a good education because it helped. What do we do in planning and zoning? We have a lot of input on new facilities, new people want to move fences and want to do this. Is it according to code? And can we put new houses here and new businesses here and that sort of thing? So I worked on that group for, like I say, almost 7 years and got a very high education. At that time, Hearst also had a fire academy, a police academy, and my wife and I went through both of those academies. A couple of years later, after that, I guess I was secretary treasurer, so I was the treasurer of the fire academy because they couldn't find somebody, and I volunteered. So I'll do it. So I served 2 years as a treasurer of the fire academy. There was a big storm down in South Texas. That had the hurricanes and stuff down in Beaumont and Houston and so forth. I forgot the year. It's been quite a few years ago, but that just about blew that place away. And a lot of people from Beaumont come up here, and we had to find houses for them, and we put them at the Hearst Rec Center. And they had cots, and unfortunately, the people you really got to feel sorry for because they had lost houses and homes and who knows what else they'd lost. And we had this thing was wall-to-wall people, and we worked up there for my wife and I did, and those other folks worked up there 2 or 3 weeks, I guess. And we go up there every day, every night. Somebody stay there every night with them, and we'd get food for them. So that's that was done pretty well by the. I guess a combination of the fire organization did a lot of it, and the police organization probably did some. They were up there protecting the place, so that's what we did. I started getting some telephone calls from a few people. Said, you really ought to consider being on the city council. 2 of my neighbors and 2 friends of mine from Arlington come help me. The 6 of us, but they didn't work full time. My wife and I, we worked once, walking at every street in Hearst, Texas, from north to south, to east to west, and anywhere else we could find. They wanted to talk to us. And knocked on a lot of doors. I used to say you used to have to kiss a lot of frogs, right? So we did that. I got there in 2013. And there's a lot of things already going on because I just got, one of the big things I remember at the time, but we were building a new city police building. I knew some of this was going on my planning and zoning days, so I knew of that. I have been involved with the conference center because the conference center, most of that was done primarily on the P&Z group. A lot of it was. I did deal with the new hotel that came into the conference center that we built, and worked that process out. This year, we just put in another senior living center behind Mary Drive at the rec center. And it's just opening up this year, and I don't know if it's totally full or not, but there's for seniors over 55. And I don't know how they drew my name, but they drew my name out of a hat to serve on one of the National League of Cities boards. if you buy something in Hearst and you buy it from Amazon, Hearst didn't get taxed for it. So the committee that I was on says, our cities need to get taxed for this stuff. If our people do it, it comes to them. But it was going to other cities, like Chicago, where it shipped from. So I worked on that committee and a long time, and went to Washington D.C. and met a lot of congressmen. That's something new too. I've done a lot of congressmen and senators and that kind of stuff. That's a different world. We made some headway, and we are now getting, if you buy something from Hearst and live in Hearst and you buy it someplace else, we do occasionally and get some dollars back in our revenue. So that was one thing we probably accomplished out of that. So that's one thing we did. I'm no longer on that board, but that's one thing we accomplished during that National League of Cities. Was on Six Stones board for 5 years. Six Stones basically is a board that started to help kids during the school year. So they had a big events every year before school start for backpacks to school program. So we did that. Same thing with Rotary. I was on a Rotary board, and we did a lot of stuff for youth. I did Meals on Wheels for a couple of years, every day, every one week a month. I had a great time doing that. I coordinated the Salvation Army Angel Tree program at the mall for 3 years for Rotary at the mall. My wife and I did. We worked sometimes like 30 or 40 hours a week out there just doing that. Same time, I didn't get to tell you, I also spent 2 years working at the mall, volunteering at the mall at the police department. They have a police group there, and I was helping the police officer there at the mall. I worked one day a week. HEB Education Foundation, this board provides scholarships for teachers, or grants for teachers. So I joined that. I thought that's a good thing, because both my sons are going to Bell High School and graduated, and I had lost one son about 20 years ago now. He passed away, and unfortunately, anyway, he loved Bell High School, and so I said, maybe we could do something for him. So one thing I found out there, you can get a brick with his name on it. If you buy it, I forgot that cost you a couple bucks or something, more than that. So I said, okay, so we got this brick. The next thing I saw something that says, you can also do something. You can do a foundation for your son's name. So I said, we'll do that. Growing up, from the time I was a kid or baby, I guess my parents were in church. My mother was, and dad. And that's what they did. They served in churches, and various churches. And my dad was a deacon for a long time. My mother was a teacher a long time. I really never had any inkling to do it. All I wanted to do, I moved to Hearst, Texas, do my job with the company I worked for, Xerox, and I did it pretty well because they did pretty well by me. Cause I worked there 25 years and did well. And then I got to go to. Next thing I know, the people appointed me to these boards and so forth, and I just kind of migrated to those things. I really had no desire to get in this line of work, but here I am, and I said, I feel very satisfied that what I've done here in Hearst and for other people, and I hope that when my tenure's up, long and gone, somebody else will take my spot pretty soon, probably. I've been on the board now, totally. I've been on city boards in Hearst 34 years. Since I got to Hearst, I've been here 45 years, and I got in soccer when I first moved back in '78. So my whole life I've been doing something for the city of Hearst, quite frankly. But I loved every minute of it. Every minute. I would never change nothing.